the $20 billion megaproject that could end global shipping forever. Russia is budgeting 1.8 trillion rubles, around $24 billion, for Arctic shipping development until 2035, pouring money into a route through ice where no commercial ships should be able to survive. The Northern Sea Route could reduce shipping distances by up to 40% compared to the Suez Canal, potentially making the world's most critical trade choke point obsolete. The Arctic is thawing roughly 25 years ahead of earlier projections, and this $20 billion gamble might actually work. Climate change is causing the ice to thin and recede at an unprecedented rate. Since 2007, in late summer, both the Northwest Passage and Northern Sea Route have been temporarily ice-free, waters that, just decades ago, would have been solid ice year-round. The Arctic is warming around 4 times the rate of the rest of the world, a transformation that has outpaced even the most pessimistic climate models. For centuries, explorers died trying to find this passage. The first recorded successful transit came in 1878 when the Vega, funded by Swedish and Russian industrialists, navigated the Northern Sea Route, a voyage that technically pioneered the way, but also exposed the route's brutal reality. Sea ice prevented steady forward progress. For most of the year, parts of the route remained completely iced in. Even the Soviets, with their nuclear icebreakers and decades of Arctic expertise, couldn't make it work commercially. The Soviet Union built up an icebreaker fleet and developed deep knowledge of Arctic shipping dynamics. But geopolitical isolation and restrictions against foreign vessels kept the route closed to global commerce. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the route briefly opened to foreign ships, but regional economic difficulties and continued ice barriers prevented sustained traffic. Now, melting ice is rewriting the mathematics of global shipping. The Northern Sea Route between Europe and Asia spans just 13,000 kilometers, compared to 21,000 kilometers via the Suez Canal. That distance reduction translates directly into time. 1 month of transit becomes less than 2 weeks. For a container ship carrying $100 million in cargo, every day at sea costs roughly $50,000 in fuel, crew wages, and opportunity costs. Cut 2 weeks off a voyage, and you've saved $700,000 per trip, before accounting for Suez Canal tolls that can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. The first container ships began testing the Arctic route more than a decade ago, but only on specialized ad hoc voyages. In 2025, that changed. A new service launched an 18-day scheduled run from the Chinese port of Ningbo Zhoushan to Felixstowe in the UK, accompanied by icebreakers, the first time the Arctic has seen what shipping companies call a traditional liner service, with multiple stops. But melting ice doesn't create clear blue waters. It creates chaos. Unexpected sea ice can damage ships or trap them in place, forcing costly reroutes or complete turnarounds. In 2021, nature delivered a stark reminder. Ice suddenly covered the Arctic Ocean faster than weather forecasters predicted, leaving approximately 20 massive vessels, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, stranded at sea. The route that promises to revolutionize global trade comes with a catch that most shipping executives are only beginning to understand. While politicians debate melting ice and shorter routes, the infrastructure required to support year-round Arctic shipping represents one of the most expensive engineering challenges in maritime history. The United States committed $3.5 billion to build 5 Arctic security cutters, but that's only the beginning. A single heavy icebreaker now costs nearly $1.7 billion as of March 2025, with annual maintenance reaching $22 to $28 million, including hull ice tank inspections every 3 to 4 years and crew expenses for 30 to 45 personnel per vessel. Russia is pouring 90 billion rubles across 2025, 2026, and 2027, nearly $1 billion over 3 years, to complete construction of its flagship nuclear icebreaker. The scale required is staggering. Not just 1 or 2 specialized ships, but entire fleets. The Coast Guard's icebreaker fleet is undergoing massive expansion, with almost $9 billion allocated for new ships. While the USA operates only two operational icebreakers, Healy and Polar Star, Russia has 42, with another 12 planned or under construction, and China has 2. The Americans are scrambling to catch up, but severe delays and cost overruns, attributed to persistent design challenges and a strained domestic industrial base, have created a significant capability gap. Arctic ports require completely different infrastructure than warm water counterparts. In Canada, Manitoba's investment has reached $87.5 million, combined with a $175 million federal commitment for a total of $262.5 million in public funding for the Port of Churchill expansion alone. These new class vessels designed for year-round Arctic operations will feature hulls with maximum icebreaking capacity of 2.5 meters. Canada's polar icebreaker will measure 158 meters long and 28 meters wide, designed to operate self-sufficiently in the high Arctic year-round across more than 162,000 kilometers of Arctic coastline. But even with all this investment, the infrastructure remains dangerously thin. A critical constraint of Arctic shipping is the limited number of ports of call. According to the Arctic Logistics Information Office, only 16 ports, most ice-covered for part of the year, exist along the Northern Sea route. These ports and transshipment hubs remain nascent compared with Rotterdam or Singapore. Emergency response and salvage options are severely limited far from major maritime centers. This $20 billion gamble requires not just melting ice, but a complete reimagining of maritime infrastructure in the world's most hostile environment. Every port, every icebreaker, every navigation system must be built from scratch in conditions where a single equipment failure can trap a $100 million cargo ship for months. And the geopolitical tensions driving this Arctic arms race are about to make the engineering challenges look simple by comparison. Given that Putin ordered 80 million metric tons on the Northern Sea route by 2024, but cargo peaked at 38 million in 2024, less than half the target, and fell to 37 million in 2025. Do you think Russia's $24 billion Arctic gamble will actually pay off? Comment your thoughts below. Drop your answer in the comments below. Now let's dive into the geopolitical chess match that could make all this infrastructure completely worthless. A new report by the Bologna Foundation has found that during the past year, 100 sanctioned vessels, often aging and poorly insured, have used Russia's Northern Sea route. This figure is up from just 13 in 2024. Russia's $24 billion Arctic gamble isn't just fighting ice and infrastructure challenges. It's become a geopolitical minefield where international sanctions have transformed the route into what experts now call an illicit corridor for the Russian dark fleet. The numbers reveal a shipping route spiraling into dangerous territory. Nearly a third of cargo ships sailing on the NSR in 2025 were part of the sanctioned shadow fleet. These aren't the high-tech, ice-rated vessels that Russia's Arctic dreams were built on. Bologna counted 38 sanctioned oil tankers passing through the Arctic this year, of which 13 did not have any or only low ice classification. More than half of the tankers were older than 15 years, the age that reputable operators traditionally scrap their vessels. Aging oil tankers with questionable maintenance records are sailing through some of the world's most treacherous waters, without proper ice protection. These vessels sail under false flags, disengage their AIS transponder in violation of international safety standards, and frequently carry insufficient insurance, all of which boosts the risk of accidents in the vulnerable Arctic environment. When a catastrophic spill happens 200 miles from the nearest rescue station in sub-zero temperatures, limited rescue and environmental response centers along the NSR further increase the hazard related to shipping accidents in the Arctic. Russia's response to mounting international pressure has been to pull the curtains closed. Rosatom, Russia's powerful nuclear corporation and official operator of the Northern Sea route, has a tendency to hide information from public eyes. As such, the NSR administrators this year ceased publishing information about the current location of ships on the NSR, as well as a yearly summary of accidents and incidents along the route. The transparency that once characterized Arctic shipping operations, critical for safety coordination in an environment where rescue missions can take days, has vanished. But Russia's control over the route creates a stranglehold that extends far beyond shipping regulations. The North Pole itself is contested between Canada, Greenland/Denmark, and Russia, while the United States, alone among the 8 Arctic states in not ratifying the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, maintains an unresolved maritime dispute with Canada in the Beaufort Sea. Every container ship that enters Arctic waters must navigate not just ice, but a web of territorial claims where a single diplomatic miscalculation could shut down the entire route. The geopolitical chess game has already begun reshaping global alliances. Soon after Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Intergovernmental Arctic Council was suspended because 7 out of the 8 Arctic states, Canada, Denmark, Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the US, decided they could no longer work with the largest Arctic state, Russia. The cooperative framework that was supposed to manage Arctic development, environmental protection, safety standards, search and rescue coordination, has collapsed just as the route becomes commercially viable. Territorial tensions are escalating beyond anything shipping companies anticipated when they first calculated those attractive time savings. The Arctic could become the stage for far more dramatic geopolitical realignments, with implications that could make the current sanctions regime look like a minor inconvenience. The route that promised to revolutionize global trade is revealing itself to be a powder keg where environmental catastrophe and international conflict converge in the world's most unforgiving waters. Arctic Sea Route use will increase global shipping emissions by 8.2% by 2100, with Arctic emissions rising from 0.22% to 2.72%. The route that promises to revolutionize global trade by cutting shipping times in half could accelerate the very climate crisis that made it possible in the first place. Every ship that enters Arctic waters carries more than cargo. It carries black carbon. Between 2015 and 2021, Arctic shipping-related black carbon emissions approximately doubled. This isn't just another pollutant. It's what scientists call a climate superpollutant that creates a devastating feedback loop. Black carbon emissions from ships don't just contribute to climate change globally. They directly darken Arctic snow and ice, causing them to absorb more heat and melt faster. A massive container ship burning heavy fuel oil as it pushes through the Laptov Sea releases black soot from its exhaust that settles on pristine white ice, once reflecting 90% of the sun's energy back into space. Darkened with carbon particles, that same ice now absorbs heat instead. The ice melts faster, exposing dark ocean water that absorbs even more heat, which melts more ice. As white ice melts, it exposes the darker ocean surface, which in turn absorbs more sunlight and heat, accelerating ice melt and regional warming. The numbers reveal the cruel irony. The number of ships entering this area increased by 37% between 2013 and 2023, while the total distance traveled by ships increased by more than 100%. More ships mean more black carbon, which means faster melting, which opens more water for even more ships. Black carbon emissions from Arctic shipping are significant at the scale of the whole region, and they are growing rapidly. But here's the complexity that makes this crisis so difficult to solve. The efficiency gains are real. That container ship burning through the Northern Sea Route isn't just saving 2 weeks of transit time. It's actually burning less fuel overall than the traditional route through Suez. The retreat of Arctic sea ice is allowing more ships to navigate shorter, faster, and cheaper routes, providing emission reductions of 24%. The shorter distance means lower total CO2 emissions per voyage, even as the black carbon emissions accelerate local warming. The international community recognizes the problem but remains paralyzed by competing interests. In February, global petrostates, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, opposed an effort meant to slow Arctic warming. The rejected Arctic proposal would have required ships sailing in the far north to stop burning residual fuels responsible for high black carbon emissions and instead move to less polluting alternatives. With the latest IMO decision, it will take up to a year before further shipping decarbonization proposals are reconsidered, delaying the implementation of cleaner fuels for at least 2 years. The window for action is rapidly closing. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than elsewhere on Earth. In March, Arctic winter sea ice tied for its lowest measured level. Scientists project that by 2100, the Arctic is expected to support year-round navigation for all major vessel types, allowing the Arctic sea route to handle 2.25% of global traffic, totaling between 180,608 and 569,214 voyages annually. The route that was supposed to be climate change's silver lining, shorter distances, lower emissions, economic efficiency, is revealing itself as another accelerant in a warming world where every solution seems to create new problems. As the ice continues to disappear, the economic pressures driving ships into these waters are about to collide with environmental realities that no amount of infrastructure spending can overcome. But here's what the numbers actually reveal about Russia's $24 billion Arctic gamble. It isn't working. Cargo on Russia's northern sea route fell for the first time since 2022, dropping 2.3% to 37 million tons in 2025, far from Putin's target of 80 million tons by 2024. The analyst behind the study sees no sources of growth for 2026. The route that was supposed to revolutionize global trade is hemorrhaging cargo while the world's shipping companies watch from the sidelines. Chinese operators managed a record 103 transit voyages carrying roughly 3.2 million tons of cargo in 2025. But these numbers expose the route's fundamental limitations. According to Peter Sand, chief analyst at leading freight intelligence platform Zanetta, the number of ships transiting the northern sea route last year was a record high. But we counted 15 ships, so that's what a record high looks like. 15 ships. For context, the Suez Canal processes over 20,000 vessels annually. The world's largest shipping companies aren't buying the Arctic dream. MSC, a global container shipping giant, explains, MSC will not use the northern sea route as a maritime trade route to transit the Arctic. There are significant safety, environmental, and social issues surrounding trans-Arctic shipping. While transit times may be reduced during a limited period of the year, any perceived gains are likely to be entirely outweighed by significantly higher costs, capacity restrictions, and the operational uncertainty inherent to the route. Even China, Russia's primary remaining trade partner, is exploiting Moscow's desperation. China is paying 30 to 40% below market rates for sanctioned Arctic gas. The route that promised to give Russia leverage over global trade has instead made it dependent on a single buyer who dictates terms. The economic mathematics that made Arctic shipping attractive on paper crumble under real-world constraints. Over a 5-year horizon, Arctic routes will remain primarily dedicated to the transport of raw materials, with cost savings significant for liquid bulk, but containerized transport remaining uncompetitive despite the shorter distances. Operational constraints, the limited size of vessels, and the specific costs of Arctic navigation prevent it from competing with the economies of scale of traditional routes. Canadian and American maritime experts say 2% of global shipping could be diverted to the Arctic by 2030, reaching 5% by 2050. But even these modest projections depend on factors beyond Russia's control. Stable geopolitics, massive infrastructure investments, and international cooperation that sanctions have made impossible. Trans-Arctic shipping routes will not serve as a substitute for existing shipping lanes, but will instead provide new and additional capacity for a growing transportation volume. Multi-year ice and the limited seasonal window for trans-Arctic voyages will for the foreseeable future remain formidable obstacles to the development of Arctic shipping and its economic viability. The northern sea route isn't becoming the Suez of the North. It's becoming a seasonal supplement for bulk commodities, dominated by sanctioned vessels carrying Russian energy exports to China. Within 5 years, their commercial impact will remain marginal, with only 3.5% of trade between East Asia and Europe or North America potentially using Arctic routes. Russia's $24 billion investment has created the world's most expensive shipping route for moving its own commodities under international sanctions. The infrastructure exists, the icebreakers are operational, but the global shipping industry has rendered its verdict. Arctic shipping will see more activity over the next 5 to 10 years, but it will remain relatively small compared with traditional global shipping routes, less a replacement for established trade corridors than a long-term strategic frontier. Russia's Arctic gamble represents one of the most spectacular strategic miscalculations in modern maritime history. The country poured $24 billion into infrastructure for a shipping revolution that never materialized, achieving cargo volumes less than half their targets while accelerating the very climate crisis that made the route possible. The numbers tell the story. 15 ships constitute a record year for transit traffic, while the Suez Canal processes over 20,000 vessels annually. What was supposed to be the Suez of the North has become a niche corridor for sanctioned cargo ships, many aging and poorly insured, creating environmental risks that outweigh any economic benefits. The convergence of failed cargo targets, mounting environmental costs, escalating geopolitical isolation, and infrastructure challenges that dwarf their utility reveals a fundamental truth. Melting ice alone cannot overcome the realities of global economics, international law, and environmental responsibility. Russia's Arctic dream has frozen into a cautionary tale, a $24 billion monument to the limits of what raw ambition and melting ice can accomplish when the world's shipping industry, environmental science, and geopolitical reality all point in the opposite direction. The verdict is clear. Russia's Arctic gamble has already failed. The ice may be melting, but the dream of Arctic shipping dominance has crystallized into one of the most expensive strategic blunders of the 21st century. Subscribe for more hidden engineering stories and watch this next. The impossible logistics behind Dakar.